Britain, it's not predominantly practiced anymore. The British, when they went to India, they used the already existing Varna system, and they used it to their benefit. Now they could segregate people and employ them differently. So all the lower class, so-called lower class citizens would become laborers and all those stuff. And prior to British, the Mughal invaders also had classes. They classified people, and they did the same thing. But the system originally did start in India. It was started, there are a couple of different theories about how it started. Some people say it was supposed to be something else, and eventually it has turned out into present-day casteism. But people believed that the god of creation, called Brahma, the four-headed god of Hindu mythology, if you've ever seen, so says that he can see all directions or something. So when he was creating people, the ones that came out of his head became the upper class citizens. They were the priests, they were the educators. Only priests had the knowledge, they had the books. They were the ones who would choose if they want to give the knowledge away. And it stayed with them for thousands of years. So that's the first class that came from his head. And then the next group was supposedly derived from his shoulders. And these people were made to be warriors. Warriors, not like your run-of-the-mill soldiers, like they're kings and rulers, basically. And the third group supposedly derived from his thighs, and they became traders and businessmen.
Did you say thighs?
Yeah, thighs, like up 4 different parts of his body.
Yeah.
And the feet, people that came from his feet became rest of the classes. They were called Shudras, like laborers. And they could be doing they could be farmers, any kind of labor were put in that class. These 4, when you think about it, okay, they're just, it was supposed to be done to differentiate people based on what they did, the work. So if you say this person is born in this caste, so he will be doing this, like a goldsmith or anybody that has done, they continued in those professions for many generations. So you automatically know who's the village goldsmith is, or the jeweler is, or the person who treated people. Medicine man would be a different one, and priest would be a different one, a teacher would be a different one. But with time, what happened was it all got mixed up, and instead of focusing on the work they did, people started discriminating based on the work they did. Even though it was supposed to be started for convenience to differentiate people, it's like how we differentiate one dog breed from the other. But we don't say this dog breed is superior and this is inferior. That's what happened to caste system. It was classified, it was put in place to differentiate people based on the work they did, but then it eventually caused to discrimination. People that were doing more sophisticated work started to consider themselves more superior than others. So these 4 classes were supposedly people that were created by this Lord of Creation, Brahma. And there's another group that does not fall in any of these categories. They were called Achutes, literally meaning untouchables.
What part of the body did they come out of?
They have no, they were, I don't know. I did a lot of research on how they justify them being created from where they're created. These people, they were not even people, basically. That's probably why they weren't put in any of these classes. So they're untouchables. And these untouchables were given the jobs that no one else would do. Like, for example, manual scavenging. They would be cleaning up people's toilets, sewers, everything. And people in Hindu background, people that dealt with dead bodies, also it's a caste. Only those people in that caste deal with dead bodies, because it's a funeral fire and everything. You have to touch and do that. Not everybody does it, and these people are segregated. So people who did this kind of jobs were the untouchables. So we're, at this time, no matter the reason it started several years ago, probably 3,500 to 5,000 years ago at the most, even if we give it extra credit. It could not have been older than that. But it exists till today. All these upper castes have gotten mixed up now. The Shudras that I told you about, the labor class, the farmers and such, along the way, when they became little powerful, if somebody gave them a little bit of land, this person has been a laborer for a long time under a king, and then he was given a few acres of land to do his own farming. Now he's a landlord. So suddenly his status has changed in the society. So his family, his next generations, eventually they had the starting, right? So they had the foundation. Now they could grow, and now they can employ the laborers to work for themselves. So suddenly these Shudras, who were to begin with laborers, some of them had the opportunity to rise up in the hierarchy, and they started calling themselves upper caste people. So, and that all came from land ownership, mostly land ownership. And you just make more money, right? You become rich. And then once you're rich enough, I guess they somehow got squeezed into the higher levels where they were able to get education from the educators that were like the top class. Until then, they were only educating their kind. So the kids would go to school or do learn whatever knowledge that they had back then were confined to their caste. But eventually, over time, these people who become rich and powerful, for example, businessmen or the warriors, they were all taught because they had money. So the upper caste people also, like for example, I'll give you my example. I was born in an upper class, but I was born a Shudra. I'm still at the bottom of that bottom class. But because my parents were educated, my grandparents had some land and their forefathers, so I was lifted from that place. By the time it was my time, we were not Shudras anymore. Nobody would like to be called a Shudra. They'll say, oh, we're different, right? All these four classes are doing okay, more or less. They have opportunities, they can. My main concern is for the people that are labeled untouchables. Dalits, the term that is used by, officially by the government is Dalits. And there are quite a few subcastes in this. And for many jobs, for generations, all these years, thousands of years, some castes are still stuck doing what their ancestors were doing. That has not changed for them. Manual scavenging is one such job. Indian government has come up with two laws and made sure that this is not done by people. It should all be mechanized, and funds were allotted for that, but they were not. It was not implemented. It was never implemented. So whoever is the contractor that has to take care of broken, plumbing or broken sewer system, he will hire people from this caste. They have no protection, no masks, no gloves. I mean, if you're thrown in the sewer, gloves probably wouldn't even do much, right? They literally get down into the sewer to clear the blockage and clean. And this is 2020. And these people, maybe once out of thousands of them, maybe one person got a chance to go to school, study, and get out of there. And they'll probably be able to count them on your fingertips. Rest, everybody are stuck in that. And mostly men do this. Men are the ones that are going into the sewers doing the hard stuff, and women are the ones that are picking up literally waste from people's homes. It really gets me when I talk about this, because I lived in India until I was 27, but I did not know this. I had no idea, because I was in a upper middle class home. I was raised in, and we had toilets, and I didn't even know that there were people who were doing this. And just about 4 years ago, I found out, and it just broke my heart. I cannot believe that the government is allowing it to happen. Recently, the Prime Minister did a big stunt where he brought a Dalit man, washed his feet to show that he does not practice untouchability. Manual scavenger, he was a manual scavenger. But the money that was allotted to them has not reached them. The implementation is not there. But for the media, people look at them, all these fans will say, oh, look at our Prime Minister, he's, it's all drama, right? But yes. So
sorry, what was the question? I didn't quite hear.
Prime Minister Modi.
Prime Minister Modi.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there was a big dramatic media event that happened around that, about showing how good of a man he is, and he's touching the Dalit man's feet. But after, there are two renowned people the Indian government has hired into higher positions as President of India. President doesn't have much power. The Prime Minister and the cabinet, they all make the President. It's like just the seal. Certain things have to get his signature. So a Dalit man became that. When he was chosen for that position, he went to the temple, and he was not allowed in the temple. He did the whatever ceremony that they do. He did it outside the temple, and he did not question. He could have said, "This is BS. I'm walking out of here. This is an insult." He didn't, because he is also conditioned. He's probably thinking, "Oh, I've come to this far. That itself is a great deal." Nah, so there's no point fighting for more. But that's heartbreaking. So all the people that finally say, okay, our guy is in a big position, he will do something for us, and he'll be able to talk about our problems, but he can't. He's just a puppet in the more powerful people of upper caste. It is heartbreaking.
And I just had a good question when it comes to, I guess, how Hindu societies deal with the caste system. Like, for example, like when I was in middle school, so I was not aware of it. And I remember the story, like I was studying sociology in school, and that's where the prof brought up the concept of caste system. So I went home and I asked my mom what it was, and that's when I first heard about it. But
first heard about it.
Yeah, because
How old were you?
12 years old maybe.
Yeah.
And then, because in our home we never really talked about religion much, we tried to stay away from it. So, first time I heard about it in my sociology class, and when my mom was telling me how even some people in our family even believed in it, to a degree, I was quite surprised by it. So my question is, when it comes to the, I guess, the BC or the Vancouver Hindu society, like the Indian population, how seriously do they take the caste system?
Oh, we're lucky. We're good here. I'm so happy to say that. It's crazy in the United States and UK, but in Canada, in BC, I'm not talking for Toronto. I don't know how it is, but in BC so far, nobody talks about caste in a conspicuous fashion. Maybe they have it in their head, but somebody like me who's always poking and making posts against caste and all, and it's a small community, so they know if anybody says anything about this, this lady's going to go and go all over about it. So I have a feeling that they don't talk around me, or but I know there are groups just like white group, black group, brown group, like that same way. Within the caste, there are this caste group, that caste group. We're not that many here, so it has not become an issue yet. But in United States, where people have migrated, 3 or 4 generations of people are already there, it's terrible. They recently had a cricket match between two caste people, and apparently they bashed each other up at the end. These people are living in the United States, they're all educated, and so it has to be talked about. If it's just left in India, if these people didn't bring it over here, I would say, fine, let the Indians deal with it, right? But it's spreading everywhere. Wherever Indians went, they took the caste system. But even though it started in Hinduism, it's not confined to Hinduism. The Sikhs here, they practice caste system too. And they, among them, it's a little more conspicuous. Like you can tell that they don't marry outside their caste, and there's certain things. But no untouchability, not here, because probably the untouchable people never had a chance to go to school and get here, right? So if they were, maybe it would have been practiced.
I've heard of stories, and I wonder how true this is, where people in India, young people who've run away and married someone of a different caste or the wrong caste, have actually been killed.
Yes, yeah. Oh,
Okay.
it happens almost every year. There are few cases all over the nation, like across the nation, everywhere. You will find at least one case a month where a girl marries, upper caste girl marries a Dalit man. Her parents will either kill both, or they'll kill the boy and get her to marry somebody else, or either kill the boy and somehow let the girl live, or kill both. So either way you look at it, most of the time they run away. They elope and they hide, and they try to build a life. But a year ago, a pregnant woman, she was, I think, in her 5th month of pregnancy, she went for a checkup with her husband. She left her family home. She's been living with her in-laws and her husband separately. She got pregnant, and they were at the hospital, and her father sent hate men to kill her husband. She was pregnant, and they've just been married a few months earlier. They killed her with the axes or something, like brutally, and they were caught on CC cameras because it was a hospital and it was right outside. and the girl, obviously, she was devastated, but her in-laws have taken care of her, kept her, and they're looking after her. She said, I don't want to have anything to do with my father, so she decided him as well. But sadly, there have been many supporters that came up in support of this father, saying that his daughter has broken the family honor. So their sympathies lies with the father. Oh, what would a decent, honorable man do if his daughter elopes with an untouchable man? He has to do something to maintain his honor. That's how dark, like people are in darkness. I see it as being in the dark. You don't know, there's no light in your mind.
How conceivable is it to oppose the idea in India that women are the property of men?
I mean, it's better compared to back then.
Well, I realize it's gotten better, but then
It's still there. It's still there.
But I mean, fundamentally, that's what honor killing is, the idea that, you know, I have the right over you to do this or that, and that your actions
There's
are
a
also
little
owned by
difference.
my
If you
honor.
go to Islam,
Mm.
the honor killing is because the woman, that comes from oppression of the woman, right? The
Mhm.
whole family, the woman belongs to the whole family, all the men in the family, and they decide her fate. In this one, it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. It has nothing to do with religion there.
Mm.
It has the
But
ideas have been people have been conditioned to think that there is no honor in marrying anybody outside the caste, and especially a Dalit.
I mean, if a higher class man ran up with that Dalit woman,
Yeah.
would the same thing be done to her?
Maybe because he has money, he could protect her. But there are instances where they have affairs. But when it comes to marriage, they want to marry what the girl that their parents would approve of. So there are many cases like that where they're at university, they fall in love, but the time comes to get married, and the parents say she can't come into our home. She's a Dalit. And then this guy, after having spent few years with this woman and giving her hopes that they were going to end up together, will abandon her for a caste woman, for his caste woman. There are plenty of those cases.
Yeah.
But the killing mostly happens because when girls defy family rules and they go and marry.
I guess that's part of what I meant with regard to a degree of pride or
Yes,
more over
there
women
is.
than
I
Mhm.
cannot deny
Though,
that.
granted, not to the degree that happens in Muslim honor
Yes,
killings.
yeah. It's to a lesser degree, but it is there. Yeah.
What's the legal status of that now in India? Is it, with Modi, is it still being enforced that it's caste-based honor killing is illegal?
No. There's an article in the Constitution. There's an Article 15. Article 15 clearly states that no person should be discriminated based on gender or caste or religion or social status. So it in the Constitution they've written very clearly that this practice is not acceptable. But who implements it? The government is not always watching you. Within communities, we are responsible to follow the Constitution. Every one of us has a responsibility to withhold. Governments make rules and then they're doing something else. But people in the community, they are the ones reinforcing these beliefs and reinforcing these rules. So they'll protect. If somebody, like in this case where this guy he was put in jail actually because there was evidence, He was put in jail. If there was no evidence, they could have bribed himself out, but he was put in jail. And there were tons of Facebook groups that sprouted, like, and local activists, banners protesting for him. Let him go, let him go, let him go. He couldn't do anything else. It's not his fault. So that's the community. That's what community does. So what will government do?
And I just would like to bring it more to the, I guess, because your speech was about how DNA can be used to refute
okay.
the cause. So I guess, can you make a summarized version of it?
Sure. I know. You know what? My presentation was very long. When I saw the questions, that's what I was thinking.
And I'll share the links. People can watch more full
Sure.
version later.
So, what you all heard about and you studied about DNA, right? Deoxyribonucleic acid. There are two kinds of DNA. In the cell nucleus, there is a DNA, and we call it nuclear DNA. And there's mitochondria in the cell, and there is there's a mitochondrial DNA in that. It's lesser amount, and there is mitochondrial DNA. In 1987, a group of scientists have done an extensive mitochondrial DNA research, and they have come up with some findings where they came to a conclusion that humanity could be traced back through the maternal line all the way back to over 200,000 years ago to a woman they named mitochondrial Eve, not to be mistaken for biblical Eve. I think people know all sorts of things. It's like the same thing like God particle.
We have a Lilith with us here, you know?
So,
Oh, I've had more than one person say, see mitochondrial DNA, mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome atom, and I'm going, okay, they're at least 20,000 years apart, and they're not the first of anything, and seriously, read past the title.
yes.
Third paragraph, please.
So when they did the tracing, they concluded that this woman existed about approximately 200,000 years ago. Tomorrow it might go further back. It is constantly changing. And that woman, it doesn't mean that she was the only woman alive at that time, or she was the only woman who gave birth. But her DNA material, her genetic material had the capacity to be transferred down all the way to the modern day, to you and I, to all of us. So that's why she's special. Her DNA was special for some reason. It's like HeLa cells, you guys heard about HeLa cells. Same way, this particular woman had that ability to pass down her information. So if we base our what we want to do is based on that research, we would like to trace the maternal lineage, the mitochondrial DNA. Even if we go back 5,000 years, or let's say 6, 7, and best case scenario 10,000 years. So before 10,000 years, we can conclusively say that there was no religion, there was no Hinduism or Sanatana Dharma, there was nothing. So we just started to cultivate, agriculture started around that time. So these systems could not have been put in place that far, that long ago. So if we can go that far back. These guys said they could go back to 200,000 years ago. We're not looking at that. That would be a very expensive, and we can't even conceive that. But because theoretically we can trace all the way back to mitochondrial Eve, we want to do it for 10,000 years, even 7,000 years.
In India specifically with regard to the caste system?
Because it's predominantly there, we need to have an Indian organization come on board. We already spoke with one of the senior most geneticists who works for a Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology. And he did his own study some years ago about castes. So we spoke with him, and he was completely on board, but it costs a ton of money. And each test, it's not like what you call the 23andMe, or it's not a $150 test. It's going to cost nearly $500 over there. So we thought we'll tie up with somebody in the States, a bigger company who can afford to give us a discount on that, and then take it, and then just simply get their mitochondrial. See, everybody in this room technically, theoretically, has the mitochondrial DNA passed down from mitochondrial Eve. But women, we have the ability to pass it down. Your mom gave it to you. You can pass it down, but if you had a sister, your sister would be able to pass it down. So it's completely maternal. The lineage is that. So tracing DNA testing is not that difficult. It just takes money, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we want to do, and then do it big with media and include some celebrities, politicians if they're willing, and then prove it scientifically, saying that this is a 5,000-year-old system.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with our history, human history. And a 200,000-year-old human history and a 5,000-year-old caste system, there is no comparison, there is no reason. And let's say if people say there was a reason this was put in place, they're always saying that. That time they needed this classification, they did this. Fine, but why now? Why is it still existent? That is my question. Whatever was done, whoever did it, I don't care. I care about what it's doing to the society now and what we can do to stop it from propagating further.
Before we're going to move on to humanism, but before we go to that, do you guys have any question on this particular part?
If I have Eve's mitochondrial DNA, how come I don't look like her?
Who says you don't?
They have come up with a constructed image of mitochondrial Eve, an African woman, and that's what I tell people when they talk about racism and superiority and all that. We all came from one place. It's just mutations caused color changes, and skin changes and all that. And
I think the sun might have something to do with that.
Yeah.
So now let's get to the humanism part. So, as I said when I first saw of you, like you were talking in a humanist conference.
mm-hmm.
So you identify as a humanist, right?
Okay, about humanism, about 14 years ago, I decided that I was an atheist. I didn't believe in God anymore. I was following what my mother had put in my head, or what the society, people around me were doing. So I just followed it. But
What country were you in?
I was born in India.
But at that time?
At the time, here. I
were here when
moved
you
here
decided-
22 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, so even after coming here, I used to go to temple, and more for socializing than anything, because that's the only place where you could see the brown-skinned people or who spoke the same language. So that's the connection. But I did believe in God. I did believe. I had this very arrogant notion that I had personal friend in God, that I could confide my problems and He was always looking after me. Arrogant, right? Like, I didn't know it back then, but growing up, whatever my mom introduced me to, I grew up with it, and then I continued. But I had questions. I always had questions. Finally, 14 years ago, I decided that my questions were never going to be answered, not through religion at least. If I had any questions, if I wanted to learn about life or anything, science is the only way that I could find anything. Maybe someday. So I decided that I was an atheist, right? So I didn't know about different types of atheism, different types of, I didn't even hear the word humanism until about 4 years ago. And when I met with a humanist and I heard about big humanist organization across Europe. Humanism is big in Europe, and it didn't start recently. For some reason, it didn't move to North America. But if you go, there were humanists in the past, in ancient history. If you look at Confucius, and there were Charvakas in Indian. As long as there was God, there was also non-believers. They almost parallel. And the Greek Demetrius, he was
Democritus.
Democritus.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Democritus, and he was admired by Bertrand Russell. He was
Yes.
quoted by Bertrand Russell, and Bertrand Russell's my guy, right? So
Yes.
that's how I learned about him. So he was the one, without knowing science, proposed that everything, a rose or a plant or a person or an animal, everything was composed of atoms. He was the one that coined the term atoms. Later on, the scientists did actually find everything, and it would be great if he was alive that we could. So humanism is very old in Europe.
Can we
Many
define what
organizations.
it means to Israel now? Just explain.
If I have one sentence to define it, it would be not define it. To summarize it, would be atheism with values. Humanists have come up with a set of values for themselves. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of life for modern humans. So this philosophy deals with science. Humanists do not believe that they need a God. They do not believe any supernatural entity. They do not believe that prayers would do anything. They believe in humans instead. So humans are the center of their universe. It's a human-centric world instead of being a God-centric world. But humanists believe that we can be good without God. We can have our own moral values. Our conscience dictates our moral values, and they've come up with certain fundamental rules. They're democratic, secular. They do not believe in combining church and state. They do not like indoctrination in schools. So all those things that atheists believe we do, but we just want a structure. Wanted a structure. I won't say.
You want
we
to formalize it in a way.
Yes. Yeah. Have and human rights is at the center of all this. Every person, irrespective of their gender, identity, their race, their nationality, their caste, color, skin color, nobody should be judged based on that. So rights are equal to everybody. So for me, what drew me towards humanism was when I was told about humanism, I looked up and I was like, I believe I do all that. And then said, oh, so you're a humanist then. I said, okay, fine, I'll be a humanist. But I just throw in animals too in
Well,
that mix.
Yeah, but I've noticed over the years looking at definitions of humanism,
Yeah.
I see there's some variation.
Yes, there's some
And
variation.
you're talking in a more general, all-encompassing term,
Yes,
I
yes,
guess.
yes.
Okay.
For like each organization that was started, a humanist organization in each country, maybe based on their culture, they came up with their own set of rules, and they differ slightly from another organization's rules. So, all in all, there are quite a few of them.
Go ahead.
That's what the Norwegian humanist I was speaking to said, that all should come under one umbrella of humanism. We don't need secular humanists. We don't need another humanist. Humanism means secularism is a part of it. We don't need to say we're atheists, because humanism does not believe in God. They're automatically atheists, and we don't have to say we're rationalists. Rationalization or working on reason is part of humanist philosophy and free thinking philosophy, and all minority rights, everything is included in this. So I didn't have, I usually don't like to be boxed into a structure. I just don't like that. I feel like that I'm losing myself when I'm labeled.
Getting
But-
boxed in is a little bit cult-like almost.
Yeah, so what I tell myself is, while I agree with everything else, there are some things that I follow as an individual. They don't talk much about animals or life. They talk about planet being, everybody to be, every species on the planet being important. I would give a little more importance to that. Yes, human beings are more intelligent, capable of thinking ethically and morally compared to animals, but
So
I think,
earlier you talked quite a bit about the caste system and its problems, and
yeah.
what you said is generally how I understand it as well. So in India, I'm guessing there are proponents of the caste system still today.
Yeah.
Are they ever in debates or at odds with humanists publicly? Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how do those go?
There's one celebrity. His name is Javed Akhtar. He seems to be the only guy publicly fighting with these gurus. Then the mysticism. You see,
Fighting against the caste people and
people that are
yeah,
perpetuating.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and he's an outspoken atheist and very well-liked writer, a lyricist and poet. So people somehow listen to him, and he makes sense, and he's spot on every topic. There are few that do that. There are few, but getting into debates with these people is very hard. You can have two rational people with different sets of beliefs engaging in a debate and making sense for both of them. You cannot have one rational person and one completely irrational person and ask them to debate on any topic. They're not going to meet anywhere. It's just going to be a futile attempt.
If I can ask then, what arguments as such do these gurus put forward in support of the caste system and it remaining?
I just heard a small clip because I've never heard about these, watched these guys speak, but somebody sent me a small clip. So this guy was saying, don't talk about casteless country, casteless India. Everybody's talking these days about casteless India. How can there be a casteless India? Human body has different parts in human body has different functions. Same way, every caste person has a function to do. So you cannot eliminate it. You have to work together. You be nice to other castes, but you can't eliminate it from our system. So, and this person has millions of followers. So who are they going to listen to?
Well, it's predicated on the whole business of
Yeah,
reincarnation.
so even if
you're gonna
somebody's-
do what you have to do in this life, and then you can maybe move up in the next life, so that gives it.
Yeah, so it gives them, yeah, so
Rationalization,
if we say, if God is a caretaker for everybody, all encompassing and all this, he's capable of keeping everybody safe, how come these people are in such miserable conditions? And they use the karma philosophy for that. They say they did something wrong in their last life. So there's always, when everything else fails, where every argument fails, karma philosophy, karma argument will stay. Because there is, beyond that, you can't debate that. So that's how it's flourished. So people who are in miserable conditions, they themselves are conditioned to think that they might have done something so bad in their past life that they've been given this, so they have to suffer.
It sounds like the Indian version of the Lord works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Everything happens it's destined to happen, or it's written in your in your personal book. Everybody has a personal book, and everything is written.
What percentage of India, just take a guess if you don't know, believe in reincarnation?
Oh,
Sorry, what was the
Really?
question?
What percentage of
percentage?
India population actually believes in reincarnation?
reincarnation. I think almost all Hindus believe, unless they've come out of Hinduism.
The Buddhists also believe that.
Buddhists believe that. Buddhism was derived from Hinduism, right?
One of the Vedic roots.
Yeah, but sadly, the Buddha took Buddhism when he started it. He didn't talk about God. He didn't say he was God. He didn't want anybody to call him God, and he made specific rules. But eventually, he became a god, and religion was found behind him. And reincarnation is quite big in Buddhism as well.
I'd like to bring it to a different thing, but first I'll just to complete this. What you mentioned about people actually believing in it. When I was in maybe grade 3, 4, in my school, our Hindi teacher, she taught us how, if things go bad in your life right now, it's because in your previous life, something really bad, you did something really bad, so now you're getting it. Now you're like, wait, what? You don't even know you did it, you know?
See, that's the thing, right? It's like how certain religions put the fear of sin in a child's mind. The same way, and they put the fear of bad life. A Hindu family would probably say, if you do this, you'll get bad karma. Yeah, you'll get negative marking. So that'll all get accumulated, and later on, But it also says eating animals will make you an animal or something. There is also that. But there are lots of Hindus who eat meat. So just like any other religion, there are some things people pick and choose. So
just to go to this direction now, and I'd like to bring Jack into this as well. If, as atheists, we believe in evolution, right? So we do believe that we are animals. So if we are humanists, as in we fight for human rights, should we also not fight for animal rights?
we should, yeah. If animals are not included in my humanism, I wouldn't call myself a humanist. If they say, oh, animals are not part of it, I would say, okay, fine, I'm not a humanist then. They have to be part of this for me, personally.
So would you two, I guess, I think we've had this conversation in private, but just for people who don't know, would you consider yourself vegan or pro-veganism in any way?
Or vegetarian?
Yeah, I was vegetarian for a year, and I was vegan for about a couple of months, and I like cheese too much. So then I was vegetarian, and only recently I've kind of gone back to meat, just because of health issues. You have to get the macros, and I kind of hated that I'm back to it. Getting to a point that I'm probably going to go back to vegetarian, but vegan is hard. It's hard, but I wish I could. There's parts of it that I don't particularly agree with though, like stuff like like not eating honey. Like to me that just seems like a little bit a step too far, but like because that's going to be there anyway, and we have to have people control that because bees are an endangered species, and if we don't have beekeepers, then we're going to lose the bees because if they're not invested in keeping those bees, we're all like I don't know how much you guys know about it, but we really need bees. So there's some aspects that I'm not so laser focused on entirely vegan, but in terms of not vegan.
I'll just respond to that, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. If, by my understanding, vegan activists would say that no, we need beekeepers, but not to create honey for us, rather to help bees, I guess, growing numbers. But yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
I grew up in a predominantly vegetarian home, not vegan, vegetarian home. We had meat once a week. Sunday was our meat day. And growing up as a teenager, I realized that we were literally killing animals, and just, that you have that when you're a child, right? So I quit eating meat, and until I got married, and in early 20s, I started to eat meat. But somehow I got used to it now. I cannot completely quit. I quit cold turkey at that age. And now I've made very unsuccessful attempts. Year, 9 months, 10 months, several. But my goal is to become one. I don't want it on my conscience that any other being is being tortured for my pleasure. And
How about-
but we have to remember that veganism is a rich people's concept.
Oh, yeah.
You have to see, if I talk about Indian kids, they're seriously malnourished. And these Hindu vegetarian, religious vegetarians gangs, I don't know how else to get them against, but they are stopping serving eggs or any kind of meat in schools that are funded by the government, because it's against religion, against Hinduism.
Not
And
Jain,
since
yeah, they don't seem too concerned about Jainism or others. I
yeah,
guess,
because
but
they're predominantly Hindu country,
Yeah.
right? So that's what it is, and
favoritism.
Hindu government in so that has taken a big it has caused a big change.
I think she had
So
a
those
question,
kids are so undernourished. They need protein, and they need animal protein that's cheaper than. They don't have enough resources and knowledge to come up with a healthy vegan diet. You've got to be really on top of your game to be a healthy vegan. You have to know your nutrition. You have to eat properly. How is that possible?
I'll just respond to this part. In my experience, I feel like you can eat vegan and be unhealthy, and you can eat meat and be unhealthy.
Yes.
It's
yes.
not about you. It's not like being vegan or not does not mean that you're eating healthy or not. It's up to you to make the right decisions. The same way I could eat chicken strips every day and be like a
Very
carnivore,
unhealthy,
but
yes.
be unhealthy, and I could eat potato fries. That's
think
example
that's
you
valid.
gave me.
Yeah, yeah.
And you eat that every day,
Yeah.
and you're vegan but not healthy.
Healthy, yeah.
So being healthy, whatever diet you're on, it's up to you to put in the effort.
And I think it should be personal, individual choice. I do not want to judge meat eaters or vegans or anybody in between, because at the end of the day, if the change has to come, it has to come within us. If I tell you there is no God, don't believe in God, you're not going to change that. If you ever think that, okay, maybe there is no God, that would work. The same way, but we should talk about it though. The planet is being burdened by beef industry tremendously. So people have a moral, ethical obligation to think about it. If not altogether overnight cold turkey stop eating meat, but at least discuss about it, bring it up, and maybe cut down. I heard the word reducerarian. So even like the people that eat meat 3 times a day, reduce it by half, there would still be 70% difference in overall emissions and methane emissions in the world. So the same way, while I'm at it, I don't want to miss that. If I am talking for Indian kids, orphans, I want them to get their eggs. I want them to get their allowance of meat, because that's the only protein source they need to grow.
Oh, they know this.
But
access to.
those of us who have access to good, healthy vegan food, we are privileged to be able to say, I can do this, I'm doing
Make that
this.
choice,
Yeah, make
It's very
choice.
important to recognize that it is a
Yeah, we
privilege to be able
cannot
to say,
make
I
it-
won't eat this,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
We
And not
cannot
everyone
make
has that.
rules for everybody based on our experience, our conditions. We have to be, we have to be what you call accommodating.
And
There is-
Leah had something to say. Like Leah was like she waited earlier. Would you like to add something?
I'm sorry, I
No, that's okay, if you wanna go ahead, go ahead.
No, just one of the, I say question one of the premises of veganism is the idea is that if you stop eating animals, you're eliminating torture of animals and misery of
Yes,
conscious
yeah.
beings, right? But in fact, if everybody stopped eating, then stop eating meat, what do you do with those animals? If you let them run free, they're gonna be
No,
shredded by
it-
predators, right? Which is a much more painful way to die than even the worst of human.
Yes, they can stop breeding
Yeah.
new farms. They
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
stop
Right.
continuing it
But-
and manage the ones that they have
But the
now.
animals whose welfare you're worried about are gonna have a worse life.
Well, there's an
No,
argument
no.
against
No,
that.
it has
In
to
the
be
wild.
done in stages.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution
Yeah.
for it, but
Compared to how they're
They're
living right now,
experts.
that's.
Yeah, it's like
It's
the
not
way-
true, like, compared to how they're living right now.
It
being in
depends
cages,
actually where they're living.
Yeah,
I have noticed this.
precious few, right?
Well, not really, because we're in Canada, and that makes a difference. A lot of the, the research that's done on this is done on factory farming in the US, and they have a lot more people. But I also have farmers in my family who, live in the prairies, and they send the cattle out to graze. They don't want to buy feed all year. There's grass, go eat. They're gonna buy it during the winter because the ground is frozen solid. What you gonna do?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not a matter of just spending their entire life in a feedlot or things like that. But I think the quality of life question as well, because I do agree, animals do die to feed other animals, but we can be conscious of how they live
Yes.
and also how they die and not make that worse than it needs to be. And that could be.
I'd just like to respond to what Eric was saying. Yeah, it is true that, because the problem here is that we bred animals into existence, so we basically lead a life of like suffering, basically. I mean, more suffering than humans do. But the issue here is that it's not a short-term fix. There's no like solutions for short term. But some like alternatives that people have been looking into is like they've been changing farms into animal sanctuaries. So then, rather than kill the animals, like, they'll live till they die of like old age. But
Well, there's been some other efforts over the years as well. They're called ethical treatment of food animals. And they'll do things like making sure the animal is asleep before it's slaughtered, so it doesn't feel any pain at all. These sorts of things.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of farmers complain that that's a lot more work, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Depends on if the technology's there, it can help. At least that would be a step in a better direction.
Talking about it, making an issue about it will at some point, I think, may bring that change. We can say, often in the effort to be politically correct, we don't say certain things that should be said. So this is one of those things. Our planet is burdened by farming of beef, those industries. There is no doubt about it. But we can only tell people to think and read about it, familiarize themselves about what is happening, and then make an informed decision. I'm not about to tell anybody, you're causing harm to this planet, stop eating meat.
But even at that,
I'm
there's
not
like
nobody
there's
to do
some
that.
kind of like ignorance around it, because talking about them like being stunned or all that kind of stuff. It's like one of the things that really pushed me into it was not just like an environmental standpoint was a big thing for me, but it was like halal meat. When I found out how they were killing those
Yes,
animals,
yeah.
I was just I was shocked. And then
And that should be talked about more, because it's cruel. They don't want the animal to sleep. They want the animal to feel the pain.
And the problem I had was that I went somewhere and all they had was halal meat, and I said like, oh, I'm not eating it. And then after that, it was like, everyone thought I was racist, because they thought it was just some religion. They didn't understand it. I was like, no, I'm not racist. It's nothing to do with that. It's just
feeling for the animal.
look into how they're killing those animals, and it's like a part of me can't do that, and I just had to take it that step further and be like, I really shouldn't be doing it at all.
I think first reason people switch to vegetarianism is because of the cruelty to animals. That's the first thing. Planet issue is secondary.
I think for me it was the other way around, and then I heard about halal. I was like, oh, okay.
I think it was France or Germany recently they banned this practice, the halal way of killing. So if they want meat, people will have to import it from another country.
I am obviously no vegetarian or vegan, but I would still refuse to eat halal or kosher meat because they also
Yeah,
leave
that's
the
how it
animal
started
ones.
for me.
It's, yeah, either of those is, it's, you know, this has deliberately been done in a cruel way, and
I think the main thing for me that's kind of like changed everything was the idea of, you know, like if we're talking about animals are going to kill animals and stuff like that, it's like, well, those animals have to kill those animals. They've got no other choice. But when it comes to humans, it's like, I would prefer if people were just honest. Like, and I'm the same way. It's like right now, just trying to hit all my macros and like being sick, it's easier for me to eat meat. So I'm honest about it. It's just like, it's easier. I kind of have to do it, but I don't want to do it. But if people just said, I want to eat meat, rather than we need to eat meat, because it's like, it's provable that we don't. We don't need meat. We want it. So let's just be honest about we want this. And if you change that kind of, that narrative, and it's like, this is not a need, it's more of a want. And from when you get into that stage, it's like, well, you maybe want to do a bad habit, but you can break it because you're like, no, the other part of your brain goes, no, I don't want to do that. Whereas if you think it's a need, it's harder to give up. If I need to do this thing, it's harder to give up.
No, that's a really good point. If you compare, for example, alcohol, we know people choose to drink alcohol despite knowing how bad it is for their health.
Yeah.
Same way, certain kinds of meat people consume despite ton of evidence against what it does to your health. So that is personal choice. That is their
quantities
choice.
and proportions play into the health of that
choice.
too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But we all have to collectively think about what the whole industry across the world is doing to the planet, because we're already in decline, and few generations down the road are great. I don't have any hope for my grandchildren, and after that I don't even know. We've already crossed that safety level, so this has to be brought up. I think that's all. Like that would be my conclusion on that topic. I'm not saying become a vegan tomorrow, but I'm saying think about maybe switch to a different meat, not
Meatless Monday.
or exactly, right.
Yeah, I feel like it's a slow step. Don't become vegan
Yeah,
right away.
right
Like,
away.
keep
And it
that-
has to be, because your body will crave the food that you've eaten for since you were born, right? So it has to be a gradual change. But
I have the Thug Kitchen cookbook, which is a vegan cookbook that's actually really, really tasty. Not because I intend to become a vegan, but because, hey,
once in a while, you can switch it up.
well, and it expands your skills in cooking and
Yeah.
flavors and really just making.
It's
more
actually
interesting
harder
things.
for people who lived in colder climates, basically on meat,
Oh yeah.
grew up on meat, to completely quit. So people like me, it's not that difficult. I never consume that much, so it's not that difficult. It's very difficult for you. So I'm sympathetic toward that. That
A
it's
big
harder
part-
for you than for me.
A big part for me is just kind of like, I hate the us versus them. And I think, like even when I was vegetarian and vegan, things like that, it was like I would never, like you said, you don't judge other people that are
Yes,
eating
no,
meat.
no judgment.
But like it's kind of like, I wish there was more of an encouragement to eat less meat and for
Mhm.
that to be accepted. So a lot of times, like you get, I mean, it's the same with everything online, right? You get the loud, like they really are the loud minority of like the people within that group. But
Yes.
for me, it's like if someone decides, okay, I'm going to go meatless Mondays, I'm like, that's a start.
Yeah.
That's great, but you get other people being like, no, that's not enough. Like, why are you doing this? You're disgusting. You're still eating meat. Like, that's not going to encourage anyone
Yeah.
to come back.
It's almost like raising how you raise kids. You encourage them for what they do.
Yeah.
You don't constantly put them down for things that they're not doing.
Well, and
Motivation, encouragement, motivation, get things done. Bombarding them with the negativity and judgment is not going to make any difference. They're just going to say, no problem.
And we'll know from
And
this
that
point.
some
sorry.
people say that.
Yeah, from this point we'll get to the LGBT activism with Jack. But before we do that, does anyone have any questions to us on this topic? On the humanism topic?
There was one comment in the chat online, somebody saying that they think a certain kind of cheese is the reason that veganism runs into some problems. Vegan cheese, I feel, is the #1 cause for someone sticking to veganism. Yeah, we should. If anybody has questions, please feel free to ask.
What do you think about insects?
Oh, Jainism.
You know what? You've asked a wrong person. I'm a person that my close people say guilt was born first, and then I was born right after. Everything I do, I associate with harming of something else. Like if I have to kill a bug, that bothers me. But I do, because otherwise that's going to make babies in my home and propagate it.
But they've studied this. In fact, there's an outfit in McGill now that's making protein bars out of insects, out of grasshoppers or something.
For the planet, that would be better.
Yeah, much better.
Yeah, planet would be better. If you're thinking about planet, there are more insects.
It's a technological solution.
And they don't take up much space. Yeah. They don't. They're not releasing methane.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. I would probably be a vegan than insect eater, but
think of them as land shrimp.
that would be a good.
Now there's laboratory produced meat.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
So,
love lab meats.
yeah, to the next part, so with LGBT activism. So Jack, would you like to give us an idea of what it is you do in your job, or like volunteer?
So yeah, I do like kind of mentor work with LGBTQA, or I prefer the GSRM, which means gender, sexual, and romantic minorities. So it's less of a alphabet soup type thing. But I mostly have trans kids as my mentors, because for anyone who doesn't know, I'm a transgender man. And most of my work is kind of, it's not so much I mean, all these kids have like counselors or people to talk to or groups they go to. For them, I'm more the sort of, like, without being egotistical, it's like I'm the success from the worst that could happen.
Yes.
So like I don't really talk to my family anymore. Like I say that I'm disowned, but I really don't know, because I've not really talked to them again. I talked to one brother and that's it. And a lot of what happened throughout my life has been very negative. And yet today I wouldn't take any of it back. Like I'm way happier, I'm successful, and you know, I own my own place, I have a car, I have all these things. It's like everything is going right, and I'm happy, which is the main thing that I've always kind of focused on. It's like, today I'm happy. So all these kids will just kind of like talk to me, and because I've had that experience growing up, it's like there's so many little things people don't think about. Just like everyday things that you know, you just like, from going to the washroom to like just being in a class and it's roll call. You know, there's so many little things in your life that you don't think would be affected, but if you're coming from that experience, you're like, you can relate. So that kid could be having like the worst day ever, and for someone who has no idea like what it is to be trans, it's just like, that's nothing. Like, why are you so upset? You know, it's not a big deal. For that kid, it is a big deal. It's like, it impacts their life, and it might not just be that little thing. It might just be like every little thing came together in that one moment, and just they lost it. It's very hard to expect, especially with kids, to be able to just then not explode. And a lot of times these kids just, they lacked out, they'll run away, or and for some of these kids, they'll turn to drugs like really early, and I've got to try and just be there to talk to them. That's most of it, yeah.
It must be hard to not be part of your family. I can't imagine what that would be like.
It was very hard starting out, and then I was in Taekwondo at the time, and I just sort of started to realize that, you know, people that I was friends with there, and my instructor was kind of very nice guy, and he was kind of like started kind of taking on that kind of fatherly role, and I started to realize there's people in my life that I look up to, and I could see them as being like a motherly or fatherly individual, whether or not I would say that to them, but it just felt like, you know, I can choose my family. You know, there's friends that I would consider like now my family, and once I got to that realization, it's like they were back in Scotland anyway, So I wouldn't see them very often. I just don't go home very often. I would rather be like every Christmas be able to just go home, and I think that's the worst part is Christmas. Because every movie, every TV show, it's like all the family come together, everyone goes home for the holidays, and you're just like, well, I'm not. You know? So I try to open up my condo to people in Vancouver and just be like, want to come over? There's no Christmas stuff around. And you got PlayStation, you got VR, you know, like I'm trying to make it just this place to hang out. It's like come for an hour, stay overnight. And yeah, that's helped, like, it's helped other people, but it's helped me a lot too, just to have people around. And I think that's something I try to encourage other people to do. Just like if you're alone, then just try to act like you're the unselfish person, and just open up your place, and people will come. They will come. So yeah.
Did you ever get a Festivus poll?
No. There's some people who come over and they want Christmas.
Not all
No,
families
that's
celebrating together are really
Exactly.
happy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, they're not. Dude, that's the thing I always remember. There's always fights. There's always a fight, and like you just can't avoid that. But yeah, it does make it hard because everything is very focused on family and the holidays, whether or not it's Christmas, or Hanukkah, or whatever it is. We all get time off work. That's a time where everyone's like Thanksgiving, right? Go home to family.
I had a question when it comes to like the youngsters that you, I guess, coach. Does religion play a role in their lives? Does it like affect them in any way, or they're all like very secular? Like?
For most of my kids, other than a couple, they are atheists. They don't believe, but it doesn't mean that they're in families that are atheists. There's a lot of I typically find, like, I don't like to generalize, but I typically find the ones that are in very religious homes are having the hardest time with it. And it even just goes back to what you're saying, people like sympathizing with the parents.
Yes.
And, you know, so it's like they understand why they would kick their kid out. So it's like, well, yeah, trans, they're going against, you know, nature and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, especially there's like any of them that were, you know, they wanted to do like arranged marriages or stuff like that, and that's when these kids are just kind of like, no, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, or, you know, all these kind of things, and it there is this whole honor thing around, like, especially like the Islamic faith, and I've had a couple of issues with that, and those children just tend to have the hardest times, and some of them, like, so hard that that's it. Like, I've lost
they're
it.
just on their own.
They're
very
they're on
young
their own.
age.
They're kicked out, and just like, that's why, you know, there's a lot of talk about mental health within the LGBTQA or GSRM community. I don't know, I'm going to use the GSRM from now on. There's a lot of like mental health issues with that, and I think it's difficult to, you know, if you're not within that community, and it's not just like any part of that community, even if it's intersex, you know, just being different and being judged for that in any way, it's kind of mental health as a result of how society is treating them, rather than them being mentally ill and being like GSRM. And that's where a lot of people will get their arguments. It's like, well, they're mentally ill, because they will focus on how mental health is bad within the GSRM community. And that's where it gets difficult, because a lot of that is due to how they're treated. You know, the better you're treated, and the more acceptance you have from your parents.
I'll give this to you, maybe I'll forget later. I would love to hang out with those kids.
Yeah. I've got a couple of kids here. Like, most of my work is done online. And there's a lot of kids in the US.
They just want some family time or
They just,
visit
yeah,
your
I mean,
place.
like, one of the things, like right now I'm really into climbing, and there's this gym called the Hive, and I think the first time I went there, I actually went home and cried, because when I went in there, it was like there was all these like flags, and then like, oh, you know, the pride flags, all these things. And then I went into when I went to the locker room, there's just this big sign. It was like, there may be people in here that might not look like they belong. Basically, just don't give them crap, right? You know, they're here, just treat everyone. And I was just blown. I was like, I couldn't believe I saw that outside a locker. Just straight up, like, people are going to be in here. They might not look like they belong, according to you, but, you know, just live and let live. And it just meant that for most of my life, everyday life, I'm stealth. Like, people don't know. And it's not because I'm ashamed to tell them, it's just like, how does it come up? You know, like, you meet someone new and it's like, oh, by the way. So for most of my life and stuff, people don't know. So even people that I'm climbing with right now, I don't know who knows, I don't know who doesn't know. I'm not ashamed if they know, like if they find out. But it also is very life affirming to be in a place that has that amount of support, that you just feel like if something was to go wrong, that someone in that gym's got your back, because that's like the goal of the gym. And from that, I've started taking one of my kids who's trying to find their passion. Like, it's one of the things that I find very important as part of the whole mentor thing, is that I'm very focused on them finding their passion, and I try to, if it could be art, because I'm a visual effects artist, so like I will try and guide them in their art, but I also want them to find something that is exercise. Because I used to compete in Taekwondo my entire life. I was always working out, doing something, and then I got a hip injury and I couldn't do Taekwondo anymore. And this was after I'd come out, after I'd lost my family, all these kind of things. And just for that year, I had never been so low. Everything went wrong. I put on a ton of weight. I was depressed, just felt horrible. And then I was like, I gotta do something. I was like, started cycling. I found climbing, and my life changed. And in that moment, it's like, there really is something in exercise, and just like being, the way I put it is that, I go out to Squamish every dry weekend to go boulder, and to do that the first time I went up there, I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning just to cycle downtown, because the person that had the car was a North van, and the only way I could get there in time was to cycle downtown 3 o'clock in the morning, put my bike at work, run to Waterfront, get the seat, and it was like, so now I tell my kids, it's like, find your passion, the thing that you will get up at 3 a.m. in the morning to do a ridiculous bike ride.
You've lost me at 3
just to go out and boulder
love
outside.
coffee that much.
Yeah. That's my main focus on it. And now I've got one kid that I take to Surrey, go to the Hive there, and she sees all the signs. She gets that feeling herself. So, I feel like I belong here.
Since we get to the, trans athlete thing, I guess we need to bring up the controversy behind it.
No.
And it's about, when it comes to competing, how to decide whether, I don't know what terms to use, but I'll let you use because I don't want
Like
to.
trans athletes.
So a trans woman, can a trans woman go into a women's sport? Can a trans man go into a men's sport? And like what do you think of this whole controversy that's happening on it? I mean, that's been happening for like 10, 20 years maybe.
I think the one thing that I always go to here is that a lot of people have concerns that I would understand, but I know those concerns are coming out of ignorance, and that's my main focus when I start talking about this, because trans women have been able to compete in the Olympics since 2004, and since then, how many have made it to the Olympics? Does anyone know?
No. None.
None. So for people that have a massive advantage, like 2004 was a while ago, and we still haven't had one?
Wasn't there a runner or something?
What's it?
Wasn't there a female runner that?
Not in the Olympics. There are runners and there are cyclists and there are people that are doing well in their sport, but none in the Olympics.
Yeah, let's respond to this because I'm in track and field, and Caster Semenya was like a big thing. So she was an 800, 1500 meters runner. But the truth is that she was born intersex, but she was more female. I don't know how it works, but like.
Yeah, I think that was when she had a higher level of testosterone.
But she was born, female, I don't know what term. But the fact that because she's African, so a lot of more Western people look at her and like, oh, this looks like a man, So that's where it came from. But yeah, she was always a she.
It's one of those things that the best way of putting it when you're talking to atheists, I find, is to say, there's no evidence, there's no research that proves that there's an advantage. At the same time, there is, when we talk about sports, people do have genetic advantage, and we know that. Like Michael Phelps has a genetic advantage. That's why he is so good at swimming, and that is proven. Like we have the paper. This states he has a genetic advantage. and I'm not seeing pickets and like, he can't win, this is not fair. I'm like, but we proved it. Like he has an advantage. Is this fair? And then you get to like transgender athletes, and everyone's like, well, it's not fair. It's just common sense. It's not fair. It's like, well, show me the paper then. Show me the evidence. Because if they're all saying, well, there should be like a separate branch. I'm like, I competed in Taekwondo while as a trans man. And there's less concern there because they obviously always see you as at a disadvantage. I wasn't winning. You know? I've got gold medals at home. Like I wasn't at a disadvantage, but like nobody really cares because I always feel that there's a little hint of misogyny in there. And
so why have separate sports then? Why not just have sports?
Well, because there is testosterone and there's estrogen, right?
But I mean,
and that's the difference.
There's either an advantage or there's not. And if there's not, then why separate the sports?
Testosterone and estrogen.
So
if they match, then we're fine.
So if you're on the hormones for your chosen gender, if we want to call it that, then that is fine. I guess there have been some activists who have said that people should be able to, you know, choose
I've heard that,
regardless of any point in their transition or any other thing, which I think.
My stance on that is less so, but I have also seen it argued that the difference between first and like eighth in like a competition for women is much bigger than the difference between first and first for like the female versus male. So there is some argument, but at the same time, like the way the rules are right now, it's based on your hormone levels, and that's what to me it just like it makes sense. It's like if you are on testosterone, you're going to build muscle. Like I couldn't do pull-ups when I was before I transitioned, and now I can do them. It was pretty easy. Like the progression from like taking testosterone, I witnessed firsthand. It was like, oh, this is a big difference. Like you it's like exponential for me. But it works the exact other way around. Like it's physically impossible to have male musculature if you're female. Mm-hmm. So if you see like a woman who's like who is buff, and she might have a bit of this in her voice, you know, and that's usually the tell. But if you see most women, it's a very kind of compact way of growing muscle because their muscle. Like I studied medicine, so I know a little bit about how muscle like develops, but women's muscle kind of like grows kind of like more into itself. So it's very. You could be stronger than a guy with bigger muscles, but it's just more compact. And when you go off, you block your testosterone, and now you're on estrogen. It's like you cannot maintain it. So you can be a male body, power lifter, and then you block your testosterone. It's like you are going to go down in mass. It's unavoidable. It's absolutely impossible. And a lot of the complaints about it is just like an ignorance of how that works. And
okay, because just to play devil's advocate, I'm almost not really. I'm more agreeing with you than anything. I did go to school with a young man who had been training. He was at the level where it's like, should I train for the Olympics in speed skating? And so he trained with a lot of very high level athletes. And you know, when he beat the women's world record, he's like, spoke to the girl who holds it now, hey, I beat your record. She's like, yeah, you're a dude, of course you did. So, you know, coming at it from that perspective without considering where the hormones are, you can see how that would initially read unfair. Yeah. So you support as long as the hormone levels are within reasonable...
At the moment I do. I haven't done nearly enough research to unequivocally say I'm against like what is being proposed, and I think it's something I would definitely have to do a lot more research in before I say either way. But I think the way the rules are right now, I think just based on like evidence, it's kind of like the way I see it right now is trying to say that we should have separate competitions is really akin to saying to an atheist, it's like, well, there might be a God, you can't prove there isn't, so you should believe him anyway. That's how it sounds to me. It's like if the evidence isn't there, then it's really not, in my opinion, it's just completely, it's madness to do, like, to change anything. Like, if there's no evidence there's an advantage, then let's not change anything. The only thing I will say is that there are going to be things that are an advantage in certain cases. And in terms of like, if a trans woman is more likely to be tall. So there's something that could be an advantage, but that doesn't mean that she is. Like, she could be, I know a trans woman who is 5'2". Like, so does she have an advantage? It's like,
Not in basketball.
yeah. And then you've got women in basketball, and you're like, well, the average height changes by nationality, like, or not nationality so much as where you're born, because you could be born here if you mix race, all that things. But there is, like, we don't, in the Olympics we don't have, you can only compete against this country because you can't compete against that country because their average height's a little shorter, so that's not fair. So there's a lot of things in sport that I find that people who get very angry about this are just completely unaware of how unfair sport is. No matter what, we can only do so much to make it somewhat fair, and after that it's just like, well, see what we can do. It's like I come from Taekwondo. I know a lot about like MMA. It's like if you've got bigger hands in MMA, you've got an advantage. But that doesn't, like, how does that factor into like weight classes? It really doesn't. But if you've got bigger hands and you can grab things easier and you can wrap around a little bit, like, you've got an advantage there. But we don't make any, like, okay, we've got flyweight, but this hand size and this, is your torso like the same, like, is it bigger or is it shorter? If you got longer legs.
So you can really only do broader.
We can only do very broad ways to make things fair, and sport is never going to be 100% fair. And non-sex-based genetic advantages are rampant.
And especially with sports, coaches do look for those advantages.
Exactly.
So that aspect of competition isn't going to go away.
It's stuff like, there's a reason that most of the best runners are black. Like, there's these like fast muscle twitch fibers that are, there's a genetic component to that you're like twice or 3 times more likely to have it if you're black. I'm like, so do we start segregating sports? Like, where's the line here? Like, we've got all these things that we actually know are true, and we actually have proof on them, and we're not doing anything about it. Even just down to things like financial impact. Like, we've got developing countries, competing against developed countries. People in those developed countries might not have to work. They might be fully sponsored. They might train full time. People in developing countries might have 3 jobs and just do that as a hobby. Whereas the picket lines and screaming about, like, why are they getting to compete on the same footing? It's like, it's never fair. It's never gonna be fair.
And before we move on to the final topic, does anyone have like any questions to ask on this particular one?
On GRSM or on sports specifically?
On either. Like,
I have a point that I wanted to bring to your attention. Predominantly, most of the fight, activism is predominantly around homosexuals.
Yeah.
Less transgenders, and even less other minorities,
Yeah.
right? So, is there discrimination within the discriminated communities?
It's definitely becoming more obvious that there is, and this is with, if you go online right now, you'll be able to find the LGB Alliance, which is very deliberately dropped that T. And it's one of those things that there was this idea of, if we all group together and we start campaigning for rights, like, we're stronger in numbers. And the problem is that a lot of, especially in like developed countries, like we've now got like marriage equality, and things have changed quite substantially. But the intersex and asexual and transgender individuals, we're kind of behind. And I think a lot of us expected that to happen. but it's been a little bit more eye-opening than a lot of us had hoped that, you know, we would be so abandoned. And that's where you get, like, we're called TERFs, but I hate that term because it's got feminist in it. Because you're not a feminist if you're a TERF, right? It doesn't make sense. But yeah, so like trans exclusionary radical feminists. I'm like, well, feminism is supposed to be about equality, like regardless of your gender, and you're excluding an entire gender identity.
I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
You're,
So that's kind of my my feeling on it is it's kind of sad that people would abandon, but I mean, I'm not going to get angry because there's still that's still a minority. It's just a very loud minority, and I think as it's becoming more obvious, they're like we have to find ways to get around it. So we can't stop a pride march anymore, take things like that.
The same kind of discrimination exists among the minorities in the caste hierarchy. Within the untouchable community, they have segregation. There's some will not marry the others. So, because the whole thing, people are so conditioned that even victims victimize others.
That's why a lot of women stay in fundamentalist religion.
You know, be a woman, one oppressed class, be an untouchable woman. And they just there's no way out of there.
Since let's bring in feminism in this, but before we, I guess, dive into this topic, do you both consider yourself to be feminist?
I've never been able to understand feminism with enough clarity to say I'm a feminist. I call myself a feminist, but in my head I'm thinking.
In the traditional sense, I would say.
In the traditional
but I
sense.
find that I frequently have to explain it. And sort of like, I'm a feminist, but I mean like true equality. Like,
exactly what I'm doing right now. Yes, I'm a feminist, but there are some things that that I don't really agree
some people
with.
have ruined it, I think is how it
Yeah. Oh, do you want to bring something up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, with regards to the GSRM community, for those of us who are now, you know, whatever that means, who are not part of that community, what can we do besides occasionally smacking down terrible, terrible people when they say stupid things? But what else can we actually do to support people who are dealing with these difficulties that come from being part of a largely unaccepted minority?
I think that the best thing that anyone can really do is just to be supportive and ask questions, but like be smart about how you ask questions. A lot of the time, especially for the transgender community, I tend to tell people who are trying to be like allies, it's just kind of like, if you wouldn't ask your friend or that question, or you would be offended by that question, don't ask it. And a lot of it's to do with, you know, what's downstairs. Like, no. If, you know, I wouldn't go to like another one of my friends and go like, so how's your penis? You know, like, yo, you would never say that to another person. So just because someone's transgender, it doesn't open up that to be acceptable.
Right.
But it's so common. It's like, what surgeries have you had? Are you going to get surgery? And you just like get to the point where like, no, dude, I just want to be called he, him, like Jack. That's it. Don't ask me anything else. It's between me and my doctor.
Yeah, that's.
So that's the only thing I would say. Like, just, and if you can, I always say that if you're concerned about asking a certain type of question, is to find someone who is like an activist, or you know, or someone like me. Because if you ask me that kind of question, I will like straight up just say to you, like, why are you asking me that question? Like, other people might get really triggered by it or something.
Right,
like that. And
right.
I know that word is like, some people hate it. But you know, it's something that could be really upsetting to someone to hear. If someone said it to me, it's like I've kind of got to the point. It's like it's more important for me to educate than it is for me to care about that. And that can be a way to get around it. It's like, just try and just don't be a dick. That's the best advice I've ever had.
Golden rule. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, don't be a dick. The religion of don't be a dick.
Yeah.
I would just like to, I guess, challenge you on like you said you were like a traditional feminist in traditional sense. but if we go to traditional feminism, like with Simone de Beauvoir and all that, the first people, they weren't very much pro-LGBT, you know. I mean, they weren't against it, but
Yeah.
they had issues with it. And a lot of people who consider themselves as traditional feminists would look at what you do and say, yeah, you're the new feminist that they so hate.
Yeah. There's a lot of like issues with that, and I think the main focus I always have, and like when I explain it, is just that I'm a feminist in terms of like striving for equality, so that whatever's in your pants doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
And that's all it's ever been to me. It doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man, or if you don't identify as either. None of that should impact any part of your life whatsoever.
And like, what issues do you see with, I guess, the feminism movement?
I have a Facebook friend, and his posts mainly are around men being in a difficult situation, men being harassed, and he always posts with the question that, okay, you talk so much about feminism, this is happening to men as well. So I have to remind him that if you look at the percentage of women oppressed and percentage of men that are oppressed, there is no contest there. It's the variable, the factor is so you can't compare those. So I would say, okay, I'm a feminist because it's all about equal rights for me. But I think most of the feminism that people talk about revolves around the middle class women, somewhat privileged already, but see what we were talking about, the intersectional, where you could be privileged, but you could also be oppressed at the same time, right? My education gives me a certain social standing in society. My skin color does the exact opposite. Same way, if I'm fighting for feminism, I'm not necessarily fighting for myself, because I know I've done enough, like I have enough comforts in my life that I don't have to actively go and fight for. I fight for those that have absolutely no chance. Think about a poor woman whose husband beats her. She's not educated, she has no means of any income. I'm not in the same league as her. So my sitting in this privileged country, with all these privileges of being able to discuss, is very different from her basic fight, where she has to literally protect herself from being beaten every day. That's the thing. So I think when feminists talk about, one thing that I don't like about, I don't know if you call them extreme left-wing feminists. I don't know how to. I have no idea.
I've heard the term feminist extremist a few times.
Yeah, let's do
That's,
that. Yeah, feminist extremists. Like, I'm not one of those. At the same, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I lost my train of thought.
I'll just
go.
I guess my question would be that when you look at all the activism that feminists do, like when it comes to like helping, say, women in Africa, or like when it comes to going to like wherever there's like they need help, why focus so much on, oh, well, a few people online who are like, extremists and all that? Why not maybe, I guess, more focus on what matters most?
Yeah, that makes sense, absolutely.
And it's like 2 in 1.
I was just gonna say that I have dual citizenship now, but I was raised in the United States. And there's a lot of overlap with Canada, but not completely. And I'm old enough to remember when women couldn't have credit cards in their own name in the United States. So I'm old enough to remember, I was in university before I found out, before I could get birth control. you know, the pill just came out. So what I found and what I really noticed in the election, 2016 election, a lot of young women were like, well, you know, we aren't going to vote for Hillary just because she's a woman. Or we're not going to just vote for so-and-so just because she's a woman. And on one hand, okay, but on the other hand, you really don't, so many, even though things aren't equal now, even though they aren't, many young women think they are, especially if they're educated and have money, because they're insulated, there's a cushion, so they don't really see. So they don't understand the stakes, and they don't know how far we women have come. So they don't know how much is at stake. And anyway, so when you say extremist feminist, I actually find the opposite to be true, not in the sense of becoming, you know, fundamental religionist or anything like that. I just find younger women to be more apathetic, you know, regarding, you know, agnostic about feminism. You know, they don't even know what it means.
I think the feminist extremist term is kind of referring to the people who are just coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas that are trying to switch it around completely to the opposite way of men being inferior and becoming like the slave class in the caste system almost. And that's kind of what I understand feminist extremists to mean, not the proper feminism that you're talking about, where there's a real issue attached to it, and you know, equality of opportunity is so important. You know,
my only point was that it's the other way, where the girls just,
the
young women just don't even, you know, they've always had the pill.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
and they might be related too, because the lack of desire to associate with the term feminism comes from these not too numerous, but really quite crazy and very, very loud people who want to co-opt the term and associate it with whatever their own personal little very weird theory is. And then everybody else is not a true feminist, because we've never heard that.
Or even more insidiously, men or religious men or religious communities labeling feminism as something negative.
Extreme.
Yeah, you know, they think feminism means man bashing.
Yeah.
I was raised that way.
Trying to oppress men now in retaliation to what has been done historically to women.
So rather than try to get equality, they want to just like balance, like switch.
Yeah.
You're like, no, we got to get here, not either of these.
It's
These are
kind of-
bad. You know.
I was raised in this really weird cross-section where my extended family would slag off feminists as such at the term, and yet at the same time, my mother worked and taught me that I had to, you know, have certain equal association. She didn't, they used a lot of the fundamentalist terms about headship and stuff, but that wasn't how they functioned.
Yes.
And that wasn't what they actually taught me, but they still coded it all in these patriarchal, sort of the words associated with these patriarchal ideas. And so it was a place of real cognitive dissonance, but at the same time, I was probably saved a lot by that, from actually fully being in that, you know, quiverful mindset. I don't know if you ever read the quiverful tweets, but
When people talk about this, they forget that there's so many women that have not reached that level where they're even able to speak about feminism. And the few men that are afraid of these so-called feminists are saying that there are men that are being equally harassed, and so there's no equality there. But that's only in the rich, maybe circles, where a very rich woman with, you know, all going for her might oppress her man. But that is a very rare phenomenon. But about I think in Asia, Middle East, and Africa, these three continents, women are still the most oppressed minority.
I would like to add, I think women are biologically disadvantaged in the sense, even if two men and women are equally educated, and women have kids and we go after kids, and men don't take their responsibility there.
And they don't have
even
to
at
go
work,
through-
if a child is sick, the woman takes the leave.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that at a time where you can really go up in your career or take leadership roles, you're bogged down by your professional work and everything at home. So we are all talking about equality. I think life is not equal and it's unfair and it is variable, because even, you know, I have 4 sisters, so 5 of us are of the same parent but completely different in our ability on what we do, or even in terms of sports you're talking about. I think it's a random. I'm a researcher, medical researcher. Everything is random. It is how we try to give an explanation to a random thing and try to in some way find answers. According to me, there are no answers for some questions and we have to just accept that. But in terms of, you know, growing up in India too, I'm just saying, like, even women started working after Second World War, right? I always say World War is terrible, but there was something good you can see out of the worst situation. If women got freedom, today even we are sitting here discussing, we are not treated as property, and you know, we have financial and you know, freedom now. Like my mother was totally dependent on my father, right?
My grandmother didn't learn to drive until her husband died. She was 50 and she went to university and became a teacher and learned to drive and all the rest of it. But she was 50. So I obviously have not lived that same, but I'm
So
not
I think
so
feminism
distant.
is a must, because if we don't fight for our rights, who will, right? And so even terming it extreme or something, I always feel the pendulum has swung so much. I don't think men even understand what we go through, because obviously you have formed the rules and you all are comfortable in your rules and moving in the society. You have absolutely no idea what a woman goes through. And it's hard to express in words, right? It's not easy. So the pendulum has to swing a little bit this side before it will come to the center.
Fair enough.
That's my...
That does seem to be the way it's going too.
And
it has to. I mean,
with
it is nature's way. It is to bring it
And
in
we
the
want,
center.
we don't want to go there alone. We want to take our most oppressed women friends with us. That's when there will be equality.
And I think we need men also in the equation.
Yeah, I
Things
think
to be more
thankfully
equal.
there are some
If
feminist men who are also helping.
Yeah. I mean, to put things in perspective, like talking about like things like that, it was very, one of the things that I went through when I was transitioning is like, I saw both sides. I saw how there's definitely like, there's male privilege for sure. And one of the things I found was like, even though I'm completely aware of the stats, like men are more likely to be attacked and like face, like, you know, be killed and be assaulted and things like that, and women are actually more likely to be hurt by people they know. I definitely had more fear when I was presenting the female, when I was younger, walking down a dark street. And then there's something about now that just, I'm fine. And and in my head, I know the stats. I know that I'm not. I'm actually more at risk, and especially like being trans. I've been beaten up twice because of this. But there's something in society that just instills that I'm powerful. I'm okay.
Conditioned. We're conditioned to think that
But
we're
at the
safer.
same time, going back to that maternal thing, I was teaching kids taekwondo, and there was never any problem. And then as soon as I was a guy, and everyone saw me as a guy, it was like, I had to watch how I was interacting with kids, because now it's weird. You know, it's like if a kid wants to hug me, it's like, when, as presenting female, it's like, oh, that's fine, they would do it, and I would still like try and discourage it, but it was never an issue. But if you're a guy and a kid wants to hug you, it's just like, you've got to be like, no, distance. And so I was kind of like, oh, there's something that I kind of missed, because I missed that. Like that, what I was getting is like, nobody saw me as this weirdo. No, and now it's like, oh, now I'm a weirdo. It's like nothing changed. So, so I've seen both sides, and there's definitely, it's very telling, and that maternal thing is definitely it's a very weird thing, but it exists, and we have to kind of acknowledge that. And that it does obviously impact women in their careers a lot more than it impacts men. But that's why I think we've got to have a little bit more expectation of men, and like they've got to step up to the plate and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's and even
not just take into account the successful women, but
yeah,
look at the vast majority of people that are not there.
We have a
Will
long way
take
to go.
very long.
I think like part of it is like when you're going to like, you know, sometimes we have to worry more about women and women's rights, and like, you know, guys will complain. It's like there's certain occasions that I find that it's like, well, maybe one of the things that's holding us back is that we're not holding women to the same standard as men in some cases. And like I've got a friend who's had a kid, and his ex-wife has made no effort to see that kid in a year, and yet now he can't get custody at all.
Yeah.
And when I compare the case to like women I know that have had
yeah.
the same thing with really crappy
Mhm.
husbands, it's like they wouldn't. This is her like third chance now, and I'm like, they wouldn't even got the first chance. And so when I see things like that, I'm just like, maybe we just have to get to a point of just being going, you know what, women can be just as crappy as men. And if we and even like things like circumcision for boys, and you've got female circumcision is banned, but we still allow it for boys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, does that give, especially outside of our country, because within this country it's definitely going down, but outside of our country, does that give female people who are performing female circumcision a little bit more power because they're like, well, in developed countries they're still doing it to boys.
Yes.
So there's times where I can see the argument on both sides. I'm like, okay, yeah, obviously female circumcision is a horrendous thing, and it has to end. And I would never advocate for them to be the same, because that would mean it'd be illegal. But at the same time, I'm like, well, maybe we have to make this one illegal too, so it's like this mutual. You cannot touch the genitals of boys or girls.
Girls, yeah.
And then
Children.
that sends a message.
Just children.
It's
yeah.
just point blank.
No touch.
If it's like point blank, that I think that would actually, I
That
mean,
would
it's not
make-
going to stop it,
Yeah,
but it's
but
going to send a message.
At least universal.
Yeah,
right?
it's
It's
universal.
code.
And
So that's
like-
where it's like there's the two sides. I get it. Yeah.
I'd like to kind of add on to that. So I was looking into why is it that women tend to win, I guess, custody of the children more. And the reason is that it goes back to the social views that if you're a woman, you're supposed to be like a child bearer.
It's misogynistic
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
itself.
So
That's
that's,
like,
and it's the same reason for like, why is it that when you look at men's right activism, they'll say some of the biggest issues are that men tend to be depressed more, men tend to lose custody of their children, men tend to have higher suicide rates. But when you look at the causes of it, it's the same, when we say patriarchy, it's the same views that say that men are not supposed to cry, men are not supposed to feel
Mhm.
emotions.
Yeah.
While on the other side, if you're a woman, you cannot have a job, you cannot have like whatever.
yeah.
And so in the end, it's the issue that both are facing of the same issue. My biggest issue, I guess, beef with the men's rights movement is that they fail to recognize that what feminism is doing is helping them too.
Exactly.
And because even like there's like one group that's like a men's rights activist on campus, and all they do is bash feminism, and they just don't get it. But yeah, I just felt like adding on to that.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I mean, that's why, like, even I did it today. Like I said, I went to the Hive, I went home, and I cried. Like, I admit when I get emotional, because I think it's very important for people that are seen to be strong and successful to admit that they get emotional or they get depressed, and they can get through it, because if the way that like boys are brought up, it's like I mean, even though I was a girl at the time, I remember I was playing football and I was the only girl on the team, and my dad just had this big like talk with me. It's like, you can't cry, you've got to get up, you basically got to man up. Like he's telling me is like this little girl is getting like
He started it.
and a red ash pitch. Like you would fall, you would scrape, your entire leg would be this like cut up, just like magic sponge. Don't cry, go. And like that's what was happening with all these boys. They're all being brought up with this kind of, you never cry, you never, and that's why
That
we
is-
have
that
this.
is-
And it's misogynistic.
That's
It's like,
abuse.
oh, girls can cry. That's
for
what girls
kids,
do. Yeah.
in a way. That
Yeah.
you're emotionally, you're abusing. If you tell your kid you can't cry, you're taking away the basic emotion from a kid.
Exactly.
And that's why their depression are high in men, because they bottle up and there's certain health conditions more because they don't vent.
Stress.
There's no stress release.
So
It's misogynistic in nature.
Yes.
It's like all these things are weak, and weakness is only for
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like, you know, these
Like a
things are
double-
kind of manifesting. It's like you have these guys who are against it. You're like, this is actually going to help you. And yeah, you got to embrace it, that these things are not weak, they're human.
Mhm.
I got a religious / atheist question. Imagine that. So you're talking a little bit about like sports and stuff like that. What do you feel about, or what would you do in, like in team sports? I know that Taekwondo isn't quite the same thing, but like when they do the praying before the sport, or, you know, pointing up when they you know, scored a
Yeah,
goal
yeah.
or whatever.
Thinking about
Yeah, what do you guys think about?
Yeah, it's something that really annoys me because I'm in track and field and I love watching sports. And no matter who my favorite athlete is, at the end of a race or whatever, they'll just do this.
Oh yeah, they do all this stuff.
And I'm like, why? I was loving you so far.
And now it's like, oh, you ruined
The
it.
thing is that's one thing humanism includes. It's freedom of religion, freedom of having self-identity is accepting of that is part of humanism. So if you become a humanist like tomorrow, you would think less about it and say,
It
okay,
gives them
fine.
personal strength. That's
That,
what I
that
think.
makes
It's-
that person
it's-
happy, and that's just
I think for me, I've
non-judgmental.
always kind of looked at it in terms of that, you know, I hate seeing it because it feels to me like they're not accepting everything that they've done. It feels like they're kind of thanking something that had nothing to do with it. And I'm always like, if I win, that's because of me and my coach. I'll give my coach some too. But it's like, I did that. That was all me. It was like, oh, thank God for doing it. It's like, no, don't thank God. You worked your butt off to win that.
That's a
That is
problem
all
that I
you.
have with humanism, is that they accept everything.
Yeah.
Everything's, you know, all inclusive or whatever.
Yes.
But to me, that's wrong.
I
Because
would-
if there's bad in the world, you've got to fight that bad. And if there's people that are being raised in fear of God, and fear of the God
Yes,
that isn't bad.
we do question that. We do question that. It's just if an adult chooses
Try
to
not
be
to go last.
devoted to whatever they,
Very good.
that's what we don't
Sure,
judge.
yeah.
But if
Sure.
their behavior interferes with their kids or anybody else around them, then we do.
Well, and
Like,
I
we're not against religious people. We're against religion.
I think that may play into Leah's question, because half of it was, you know, the individual, you know, Jesus,
Like the group
help me
part,
spike
yeah.
the ball. But, or the good Lord tripped me up behind the line of scrimmage, who knows? But you also mentioned the prayers beforehand, which tend to be something that's led or,
I find that's typically more of like an American thing.
Yeah.
That never happened to me like growing up in Scotland. Like I never saw that. I haven't seen it here either.
I haven't, yeah,
But
there
I
seems
know,
to be
like,
more of an
American
awareness
football
that
is
they have to
different.
keep it out of the official arena. They'll have like
Yeah.
meet you at the flag and pray outside
In the locker
technically
room, they're
before
all on their
school.
knees. Yeah.
But yeah.
We recently did a program, a little project asking people how they became a humanist. So everybody was giving a short video of their experiences, how they became humanists. And for me, the most important thing was when I was a believer, I attributed everything, good, bad, or anything in between, to God. If I achieved anything, I didn't achieve it, He made me do it. And I also gave away my any bad decision that I've made or anything. He influenced me. So I did not take responsibility for myself at all until I came out of the delusion and say, now what I have done, if I've achieved anything, it's because of the choices I made, my hard work and whatnot. And if I failed at something, again, it was my poor choices, so that's the clarity I got. But I didn't speak about it for 10, 11 years. I never had the courage to speak about it. going into humanism, I got the courage to speak about it. I don't know how it would happen. And I think instead of saying, I don't believe in God, now I have something else to talk about, and I can talk about what I believe in.
Yeah.
Right? I believe in human beings, I believe in animals, I believe in the planet, nature, universe, everything. I have so many other things. I believe in human rights.
Yeah.
So now I have subject matter to talk about. So maybe that gave me the courage to talk about it. But your point is right. If there is somebody's doing something wrong, that has to be pointed out. We cannot accept it because it has to be inclusive. That's what religion does, right? To one religion to another, because there is freedom. There's freedom to even do bad things. No, humanism doesn't support that.
As long as you make the right repentance of whatever that is.
Yeah, that's what he and I have talked about this before. That's why when it comes to atheism, I don't just say I'm an atheist, because I've met many atheists who are fine in religion, who are more pro-religion. So I always try to say to people in the atheist circle, I'll say I'm an anti-theist,
Yeah,
as in anti-theism.
Yeah. I have some friends that recognize that call themselves
And
anti-theists.
one of the side effects or consequences of taking that position that there are no deities, it includes not believing in them. So anti-theist is, as a matter of consequence, also an atheist. There's just no getting away from it.
Yeah, no, we don't deny that at all. No.
Some do. I've encountered a few who do. They've got some strange idea about how atheism is some kind of position that's just like anti-theism, and then they define anti-theism as something else. There is a little bit of confusion out there, but it is kind of rare. I don't see it too often. But I do encounter it once in a while.
That might come from apologists. They tend to devote a lot of time to lying about the definitions of words.
Almost all of the religious apologists who have brought that up, or almost every time it's been brought up in a debate I've been in, it's almost always coming from a religious apologist, and very seldom, like maybe a couple of times over the last 10 years, coming from somebody who actually isn't a theist. So, yeah.
So we have reached the end of this, I guess, of our event today. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or anything else before
We've got lots of time. We're good until 9 p.m. So there's no need to rush or anything.
Okay. So, is there any topic anyone here would like to bring up or have a discussion?
Well, I just want to know, in both your situations, Madhvi?
Yeah.
Okay, so since you came out of the atheist closet, have you been discriminated against?
In the beginning, yes. All the friends that I was very close with, they were shocked. And even some of my family members who didn't know what was going on in my head all these years. I would go to the temple, but I would have something else going on. It's like, this just makes sense. It's only in my head, right? So after going through that for many years, it was a relief for me. So even the discrimination that came with it was acceptable. I'm finally feeling good about being able to say what is actually on my mind, instead of keeping it in and saying something to please you, right? So that, yes, I've lost some friends, but most of them have come back to me after a few years.
And how about you, Jack? Were you an atheist always, or was it a...
Pretty much.
So it had nothing to do with...
Oh, just sit, Jessica.
It had nothing to do with your
No,
story.
I was about 5 years old. I got kicked out of Sunday school for saying that Noah's Ark was a bit stupid. So yeah, it's not.
What about Noah's Ark made you think it's stupid?
I don't know.
The two lions with manes going
Yeah. I just found it a little problematic and was a little too vocal about it. And yeah, so I never believed. But being from Scotland, I often apologize for people like Richard Dawkins, and I'm like, he's really angry because he's from the UK. I have no idea how it's crazy. Like, the majority of people aren't religious, but it's part of our everyday life. Like, every school is religious. Like, every state school is like religious. So we have all these things happening in the U.S. and it's like, you don't know how lucky you've got it. Like, you've got all these schools that don't have this religious influence. There's no option for me when I was growing up. But I went to Catholic primary school and Catholic high school. And that's normal. Like, not private schools, just regular schools, Catholic. There was one non-denominational, which basically meant Protestant. There was nowhere that you could go as an atheist child, and even today that continues. So when people like Richard Dawkins get so angry, well,
I'm totally fine with it personally.
we've got unelected religious leaders, and
Sorry.
it's crazy. All our schools teach religion.
My biggest question for the Noah's Ark one, going back to that, was where'd you keep the termites?
And I just like
In
to
glass
share-
jars, I suspect.
Yeah, the carpenter answer.
Oh.
So did they have glass back then?
I'll just add my last thing then.
Yeah.
Edit it. So just to add to like what's your experience when you were talking about how you used to go to temple.
Should be.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's one of
And
my
I'd be
moments,
criticizing everything that they did in my head, but I didn't have the courage to say it to them, right?
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, when you say they're shocked, it's
they
kind
were
of an
shocked.
interesting experience when they find that you're not religious like
Because
them.
I used to go to temples with them,
Yeah.
right? So that's why they were like, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
And also in my...
How dare you change?
I'm-
How dare you think for yourself?
For me, it was not thinking, it was like saying it out. What made me... My husband says that you're becoming a radical atheist. That's what he said. That
Radical?
No, you're becoming a radical
Radically don't believe.
atheist. That's what because I was talking so much about it.
Oh,
It's-
okay.
It's just like we're talking about anything new you get into, you want to talk as much about it. So he would say, if you tone it down, these guys won't be, you just tone it down, these guys won't have a problem with you.
Yeah, it's felt like sharing
So-
my own experience. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I remember, so I think I was here in Recon as grade 10. So my mom and I were praying, like, there was like this lake, but I had stopped believing. I remember my mom was like, Vikram, you need to be doing this, closing your eyes. So I did it, and I looked over, and I saw she was like closing her eyes, so I just put my hands down.
I used to do stuff like that all the time. Everyone would kneel, and I'd just be like, nope.
It's, I see people, reasonable people in both groups and unreasonable people in both groups.
Yeah.
My mom's, she's primary school education. She's not very intelligent, just a homebody. But if I tell her, when I tell her, Mom, this doesn't make sense, I'm not going to do it. And she'll say, okay, I won't force you, but it makes sense to me, so I'll do it. Okay, you don't have to do it. But I have some highly educated friends, doctors, and who are exact opposite. They're telling me actively to turn back. So, education and common sense, reasonableness, and they all everywhere. They're everywhere. You can't.
Maybe it has something more to do with being a rebel.
For me,
Well, for all of us. You mentioned the lack of solidarity with some young feminists, and there's a reason that getting atheists together is compared to herding cats.
We like freedom.
We do, we do.
yeah, and we fight more probably if we are put together.
We do,
would,
but-
but we all have opinions.
We all have opinions, but we're also, we're
Question.
strong enough to push against
Yeah.
something that
We
we have
question
to agree
things,
with.
I
question,
think
we
that's
question,
the,
yeah.
because you're uncomfortable yourself,
Mhm.
that's why we question, and when we don't find an answer, I think that
We're
makes you
rebels.
question even more.
We're rebels.
Yeah. Yeah, I am a rebel.
I have,
I'm proud of it.
Proud rebels.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I knew you had to leave.
I have
Okay,
guests at
thank you
home.
very much.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to
Great
meet you.
meeting you. And you keep this,
I
I'm
will,
serious,
yeah.
okay?
Okay.
Because are you on Facebook?
Yes, I am, yeah. I'll
Okay,
add you for
so
sure.
my first name, you'll see this.
I'll
You won't
connect
see-
you both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've seen
And
it.
I would really like to, if they're feeling
Yeah,
lonely,
yeah.
they just
So-
want a home and, home cooked meal.
Yeah, for sure, because I've got a couple of kids.
Especially around holidays.
How
This
can you live
holidays, I'm
here?
escaping the winter, but not.
I know, yeah. Good for you.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, wow.
Thanks.
But meeting, hopefully we'll
Oh,
work together.
yeah, I look forward to it.
Nice.
I want to talk with you more
Very
about what we started talking about.
Thank you, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for
Yeah,
coming.
yeah.
There's a comedy event coming up next week.
My friends.
Hi, thanks for coming.
She's successfully
Sorry?
managed to, she's managed to manage very religious. Yeah, I
Oh,
saw
okay.
No worries.
So close.
So I guess I'd like to ask about any events. Like, thank you to everyone who showed up. Like, we're gonna stay here for a minute and get some so you're free to join us.
That's all we have to write, we don't have to.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you, Vikram, for all this, arranging all this.
Thank you
It was
very
a
much for
pleasure.
helping me with
Thank you very much, you did
It was a
all the
pleasure to see you here.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
I hope.
That's mine.
That's all, right?
My phone number's on the back.
Are we still live streaming?
Yes, we are. So I just wanted to say, this is Vikram from the Atheist Republic at www.atheistrepublic.com. And this show is also hosted by the Canadian Atheists at www.canadianatheists.ca. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to the next live stream, and hopefully bring you another enlightening topic.
No, yeah, so many
Word
characters.
limit.
Great. Well, my number's on there, so.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. That was good, dude.
Gotta stop this.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, hopefully you're not feeling the headache coming back.
Okay, now I can wash it. Let everyone else go ahead.
I'm trying to stop this.